Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore, the host of the 1 hour program, which will air each and every Sunday. And we speak with, community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and yes, political arenas. Today we have a very special guest from across the pond, as they used to say. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're looking forward to the 179th Fair coming up August 12th through the 16th, 2025, here in Rutland. Again, I will have a chance to get to Robert Congdon at some point and have him on the program. Tell us a little bit about what is going to happen at the 179th Vermont State Fair. So today, and we have, by the way, we've been joined by the mayor of the city of Rutland, Mike Dunches, but we have visiting today for just a few days, Andrew Brown from England, and you are from, well, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us exactly how this visit all came about and why we're doing this the way we're doing it this morning. And first of all, welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Well, as you said, my name's Andrew Brown. I'm the current chairman of Rutland County Council over in the UK. And I thought it'd be quite nice while I'm still in office to get in touch with our namesake over here in Vermont and see if I could arrange a visit. And I sent a random email and got a response. And we had a couple of meetings online with the mayor here, and we've finally turned up, and we've had our first go at driving on the wrong side of the road today.
I never even thought about that. Yeah, okay. We're joined, by the way, with two other folks, and I'll let you tell us.
I've got my wife Louise here, and our youngest son Ben, who's my wife here is used to be a solicitor, and now she's a judge.
Okay.
And Ben is about to join the police force.
Oh, well, congratulations. What's a solicitor exactly?
An attorney, essentially.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So we're sort of connected, the two communities, if you will, Rutland, England, and Rutland, Vermont, right? Tell us how that all came about, as best you know.
Well, I think that Rutland here in Vermont must be named after Rutland in the UK, because when we're looking at maps and travelling around here, we see so many names that we recognise from the UK. So I'm just assuming that it was named after Rutland in the UK because maybe it looked a bit like Rutland.
Okay.
So when people first came here, they thought, this looks like a bit like Rutland in the UK, so why don't we call it that?
Is there a Rutland, Massachusetts, too? I seem to remember.
There is, and it is similar. Again, it's a semi-rural town, city. They have about the same size population that we do.
Okay.
And, we're a city in Vermont because we're large compared here in Massachusetts. It's a town, but yeah, there's a Rutland, Massachusetts.
Are there other states that have a Rutland in them?
Yeah, there's one in Ohio, I believe,
okay.
And I think there's a couple more out in the Midwest.
I think there's one in Canada as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I don't know how long ago those folks might have made the trip, but it must be hundreds of years, right?
Yeah, at least
I would say so.
At least long enough to get the name in.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and you've never been here before,
No.
correct? Okay. So I understand you began emailing Mike Dunches, our mayor, back and forth.
That's right.
And this is a self-funded trip.
It is, yeah.
It's not on the taxpayers.
No taxpayers. I've made that very clear back home that I'm funding everything.
Yeah.
You can just imagine the feedback I would get if they saw me coming over here and having a nice time when their council tax is being put up.
So it's kind of a vacation for the family. And
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're recording this on the 5th of May. It will air on... 4 and 7's 11. So next Sunday is when it will air, and it'll go across 5 stations here in Vermont. And I'm interested. I know tonight, I think, again, we're recording this on the 5th, folks, so bear with me. As we record this, there's a Board of Aldermen meeting tonight, which I think you're going to attend, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation saying a little bit about who I am and a little bit about Rutland in the UK as well.
And I'm wondering if the Board of Aldermen is kind of like the same thing as City Council to you.
Well, we have 27 councillors, essentially, who are elected members of the council.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you only have
11.
11 is it? 11.
Yeah.
And most of our municipalities are 3, 5, 7. We're one of the larger councils.
Yeah, I don't know why we call what we call, but some are called the Board of Aldermen or City Council, and then some are select boards. It's just a difference in terminology of the local government.
So are your aldermen elected by the people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
so it's the same.
And so are
system.
the select board, although they can get appointed too by the town moderator. So it gets a little bit different the smaller you get. But Mayor Dunches is correct. There's some communities that have 3 members of the board. There's some with 5, and there's some with 7, and they all have sort of a different setup, if you will. So you've been here since Saturday, I think, correct?
Sunday we came.
Sunday?
We came up from Boston yesterday.
Okay. Yeah. What have you noticed that might be different than Rutland, England? Besides driving up a road.
Yeah, that's the main one. So some of the spelling, of course, is different with some of the words.
You favor OURs.
That's right,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
S's instead of Z's.
Yeah.
But you don't call them Z's either, do you?
We call them
don't.
Z's.
Yeah. So there's that sort of thing, and the road signs, of course, are very different, and some of the food we don't recognise, or the names of it we don't recognise, because the people sometimes say we're divided by a common language, don't we?
Yeah.
But, it's sometimes.
How
hard.
about food? You mentioned some of that. Do we have different things, or we just call it differently?
Grits was one thing
Okay.
that I was absolutely determined to try, because I just wondered what it was. And the first day we got here, we did have some, and it was really nice.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know what it was, so I thought I've got to have some of that.
Okay.
So that was nice.
Do you have places like McDonald's and those kinds of things?
Well, Rutland in the UK was the only, or Oakham, which is the county town, was the only town in England until recently that didn't have a McDonald's in it.
Okay. And
But
we
now-
still
now
have
it
one.
does.
Montpelier, Vermont does not have a McDonald's either,
Right.
which is the state capital.
It's the
Okay.
only capital without a McDonald's.
Is that right?
Is that, yeah. For whatever reason. I don't know. I guess there's just not enough demand for it or whatever. And, so compare the two in population, if you would.
So the population of Rutland in the UK is 41,000.
Okay.
But I think there's something like 40 villages, something like that, and 2 main towns. And
So
that's it.
that's their county. So for us, our county is 60,000. So
Right.
if you want an apples to apples.
So it would be similar to what we call county government,
Yep.
even though we don't really have – this gets really strange. We don't have county government. We have a court system that operates on a county basis and a few other kind of small things, but otherwise we're not organized in a county fashion. There are other states in the United States that do. Florida, for instance, is very county-driven. And the county sheriffs there are like the kingpins. And whereas
Right.
here, it's the Vermont State Police. So things are a little bit different. How about the geography? Are you mountainous where you are? Or?
No, we don't have any mountains. We're about, where we live is 52 metres above sea level. So what's that in feet? 150 feet? Something like
trust
that.
your conversion.
Yeah, that's right.
And the highest point in Rutland would be probably another 300 feet on top of that. So we don't have mountains. It would be gently rolling hills and valleys, really.
And-
You'd have to go quite a long way to see any mountains from where we live.
How far inland is it from the
We're
ocean?
almost right in the middle of the country.
Okay.
So we're almost as far from the sea as you can get, which in American terms isn't very far, because it's probably only about 50 miles, 60 miles.
Okay.
So it's not very far, but to us, we never really go to the seaside, do we? It's not a thing.
We go on holiday.
Yeah. And what do people do for work?
Well, historically, most people would have been involved with agriculture. That has declined. A lot of people are working in technology. In Rutland, there's no real big industry. So there's tourism, which is quite a big thing. Agriculture, as I said, and sort of light industry.
Okay. But no giant manufacturing plants or anything like
There's
that?
one big cement works.
Okay.
So that's a really big cement works, and that's quite a big employer.
And you're a native there? You were born there? brought up there?
Yeah. We've been farming there probably 300 years.
Okay. So you are a farmer?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you farm? What do you
Well,
grow?
historically, I used to farm European subsidies, but since we left the EU, that has come crashing down around my ears. So now I'm just growing wheat. Historically, we just used to have a lot of livestock, both sheep and cattle.
Yeah.
But then I decided that was far too much like hard work, so I thought I'll get rid of them and let someone else have my grazing, because we don't own most of the farm. It's mainly owned by a big landowner. So I just rent out my grass to someone else, and I'm mainly growing wheat now, which goes for Weetabix, which is a very famous breakfast cereal in the UK.
And you're probably aware that at one point Vermont had more cows than people. That's not true anymore, although it's probably not that far away.
It's probably on the line still.
Yeah.
But we've lost a lot of what used to be called family farms that were, just owned by literally a family.
Yep.
And somewhere around 200 or 300 cattle and dairy for the most part. There's some beef as well, but for the most part, it's dairy cows. And so now, when I first came, and I've been here since 1972, actually since 68, we had probably upwards of 800 or 900 farms. We're down now to somewhere around 450 or 500. So we've lost quite a few. But what's happened, as is true in a lot of different industries, there's fewer farms but more cows.
Yep.
They're just larger, and there's been a lot of consolidation.
Yep.
So people have farms now with 3,000 cows. And the robotic piece of that is also true, where they milk with machines now in many cases. So, yeah, Vermont is very agricultural still.
That would be pretty similar to the scenario that's playing out in the UK, where small family farms are disappearing, and the land is being farmed by much, much bigger farming companies. And what I think will happen there is there'll be a big knock-on effect to the local economy, because smaller farmers like myself will be using the local agricultural engineer and the local suppliers to buy their fencing materials, etc. But larger farming companies will have their own central suppliers and their own central mechanics. So that'll have an effect on those local businesses as well.
Mm-hmm. We're talking, by the way, for those of you just tuning in and maybe recognizing a little bit different dialect or accent, Andrew Brown, who is from Rutland, England, and had it in his head a little bit ago to visit Rutland, Vermont, and began emailing our local government here back and forth, and then decided to bring his wife and son along with him to visit for a couple of days. And we're very tickled that you found time to come in and talk to us today. I'd be really interested, but I won't be able to because by that time you'll be gone and this will be recorded, how you sort of see tonight's Board of Aldermen meeting. Is it similar? Are they different ways? I have no way of knowing that because, as I say, we won't be around.
We'll follow up with you.
Yeah, that would be great,
Yeah,
Mike.
be
That would
happy
be
to.
great. So I want to make it clear again that Andrew has funded this trip on his own. This is not a sister city visit that's paid for by taxpayers over there. So the Rutland County Council is what Andrew is on and representing. But you said that you're going off that council, or is the council disappearing?
The council's disappearing. The local government reorganisation with the new government, national government in the UK, have decided that the smaller councils will all go and that they'll become much bigger. So we've got to amalgamate with 3 or 4 other councils. The national government thinks it's to save money and make efficiencies, but Rutland County in the UK is efficient and is run pretty well, and we're not likely to go out of business or run out of money in the next 4 or 5 years, which a lot of councils in the UK are doing. So we think we're being penalised because we're small, because they're saying the minimum number of people that they need in these new councils is between 350,000 and 700,000, and we've got 41,000. So of course we're miles below that bar. So we think we're being penalised just because we're small.
So does that mean you're out of a job, or can you go on the new council?
There will be a new council, but instead of having 27 representatives for Rutland, there'll probably be 6. So it'll be much more difficult, of course, to get elected. But what will happen then is I think you'll probably get the same or a slightly worse level of public service. Your council tax, which is the local tax, which is levied by the council, will probably stay the same or may go down a little bit. And it will exclude people like me, because I'm independent, from standing, because I won't have the backing of a big political party behind me to print all my leaflets and have help going around knocking on the doors and stuff in the envelopes and that sort of thing. So I think it's almost anti-democratic.
Yeah. So you do door-to-door too, which is, boy, that's interesting. 41,000. We don't, in the Senate, we represent a whole county, and as Mayor Dunn just mentioned, in Rutland, Vermont, it's about 60,000. So we don't go door-to-door. We use sort of mass media radio, which, of course, I've got a special affinity for. We don't use television here. It's rather expensive, but direct mail, social media, that kind of thing. So we try to get to people that way. And in Vermont, interestingly, there is a perception, which I think is shared by a lot of the people listening to this show, that local is better. That and I don't mean that you get down to like street by street kind of representation, but we have in the Vermont what's called the General Assembly, which is the whole government for the state. We have House of Representatives people and then Senate, and the House districts are about 2 or 3 towns worth, and then the counties are larger, and we represent 27 towns here for me, but each county is a little bit different in terms of population. So I hear what you're saying about the larger things get, even though I can't tell you that if we did that the tax rate would be lower. It would probably go up, and I'm not sure the service level would remain the same. So I understand what you're saying.
I think that's what we're worried about,
yeah.
that the service level might go down. And they're saying that there's going to be equalisation of the taxes, because we have the highest in the country in Rutland, because we're so sparsely populated. But if it equalises, they've got 7 years to do that. So... And it might be 10%, so 10% over 7 years, it's not going to be much.
No, yeah, interesting. So the services there are pretty much the same here? I mean, do you have streets that need plowing in the winter, that kind of thing? Or?
Well, we don't really get much snow. We haven't seen snow for a few years, to be honest. But, I mean, if it does snow, then it is the council's responsibility to keep the roads clear. We don't have responsibility for the police, which I think... You do.
Yes, we do.
We have responsibility for education.
When we do that,
and
too.
The roads and the bins as well. So taking the or trash, you'd call it, I suppose, the rubbish away. And planning. So planning permission. So what you can and can't build.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and social
we call
care.
it zoning here, right? So,
yeah, as my wife just pointed out, social care, which is looking after, that is more than 50% of our budget goes on looking after vulnerable people.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds like there's like great similarity.
Yeah, where the breakdown is, right? So for them in the county, we do a lot of that, like you said, at the state level, because we don't have the county government. So the social care aspects for the Agency of Human Services in Vermont is about 50% of the budget, right? It's it's a very similar thing. So where we're taking care of the most vulnerable populations, that comes from a similar place. Yeah. And
we're going through here a rather enormous reform in education. We have for years depended on property taxes. So if you own a house and some land, whatever that's worth is figured into how much tax you pay to run our schools. And it's consistently over the last 20 years or 25 years, the tax has gone up, the amount of students attending schools has gone down, and the test scores have remained pretty flat. So it's not an ideal model to continue doing. So we're in the middle in the legislature of trying to figure out a better way to pay for our educational system and get better test results. And also we're trying to recruit people to move here that have kids, young kids that will attend the schools, because we have buildings literally that aren't being used. We still heat them and cool them and electrify them, but there's nobody in the building anymore in some cases. So it's been an interesting problem. We won't fix it all in a year, I know that, but that's one of the main reasons why people turned out with pretty heavy turnout. We have our elections every 2 years in the fall, and last November there was a lot of people that were frustrated and angry about their property taxes continuing to go up without any apparent result.
Well, we have almost the opposite problem, where our schools are quite full because our schools are rated quite highly.
Okay.
So we have people moving into Rutland, UK, just to just to get into the schools.
Yeah, so that is 180 degrees from where we are. Very interesting. Yeah, I don't know what the solution. Some people have talked about income-based taxes. If you make, and in our, I know it's pounds there, but if you make $250,000 a year here, whatever I think it's 1.6. I can't remember what the conversion rate is. But
say 300 then.
Yeah. Then you pay more than someone that only makes 50. And so there's probably a good argument to make for that. Obviously, those that make a lot of money don't like to hear that because they'll be paying higher taxes. So the battle goes on, so to speak.
But if it's a percentage, then should be the same amount. essentially of your income as a percentage.
Yes. But the dollar figures.
It's a bigger pile of money. Yeah.
I think some of the challenge too is while finding the way to pay for it, it's also about the fact that we're geographically dispersed in Vermont, and we were talking about this when we drove around. We actually went up to the Baird Farm yesterday and drove by Barstow, and so where you have these municipalities where they send their kids to an elementary school or a middle school in their town, but then they end up going in it's called sending schools, and they send them to a high school in another town. We have high schools here just in this region, just in this county, that graduate. Our largest high school graduates about 120 right now. When I was there, it was 200-ish.
Yeah.
And our smallest high school a few years ago, we graduated 8.
Really?
Right. Yeah. Wow. So the cost of the overhead of that building, and obviously you still need the teachers. Obviously, and you still need some of the staff.
You've got to be heated, lit, and everything, and then maintain the building. So you've got the same cost.
Same cost.
With much smaller. So the cost per graduate is much higher.
That's exactly right. And so that's where the challenge is stemming from. So.
We're talking to Andrew Brown, who's he says London, UK. I say London, England. Is there a difference?
Well, the UK is made up of 4 different countries, essentially, isn't it? So yeah.
But it's England.
It is England, yeah.
And the mayor of the city of Rutland, Vermont, Mike Dunches, has joined us as well. We need to take our first break here, and we will be back with our guest in just a minute here on Catamount Community Connection. We're back on Catamount Community Connection, our weekly public affairs program here on Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore, your weekly host, and the program is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846, which may seem like a long way away, but the folks that we're having in as guests are from Rutland, UK, and that's nothing. That's 179 years. That's merely a blink of an eye for them. We're looking forward, though, to the next fair, the 179th, coming up August 12th through the 16th here in Rutland at the fairgrounds. So we were just talking about maybe the differences in the governmental structure, and just for the edification of Andrew Brown and his wife and son, we have 50 states in the United States of America, and each of them is governed by their own, I'm going to say, General Assembly. It's not always called that. There are different terms for it in other states, but if you understand the sort of principle, each state governs part of what they do themselves, and they have autonomy there. But the federal government, the national government, the U.S. government, sits on top of everything, and they have ultimate power. So you can't do anything that violates federal law in a state. And then each state decides for itself how their legislature will operate. In Vermont, we have 30 senators and 150 House members. So our General Assembly totals 180 people. We meet as a biennium, so for a 2-year term, and it's a citizen legislature. So we start in January and generally end around the middle of May, and then we're not going up to Montpelier, the state capital, every day and convening in committee and doing the floor work, but we're still sort of on duty. People can still call you up or see you at the grocery store and say, hey, you know what you should be doing up there, which happens all the time. Some states only meet every other year, and then some states are full-time legislators, and they make quite a bit more, but they're in session all year long. So I think I'm trying to give New York, for instance, is a full-time legislature, and I think California is as well. The larger states, population-wise, have a tendency to be more full-time. And so we have, I'm trying to remember the exact number. I think it's 435 House members in the U.S. Congress. That's the big picture. And each state is allotted 2 senators. So we have 100 senators and 435 House members. And they're the folks who determine ultimate policy. And again, if they pass a law, a state like Vermont can't say, oh, no, we're not going to do that here. We're going to do something different because you run afoul of the national statute there. So I don't know how that compares to your setup there. I should mention we generally have 2 parties. We have the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, and they're pretty much aligned differently in terms of policy decisions that are made. And then we have an independent group that doesn't do very well, to be fair. It's very unusual to have. I don't think have we ever had an independent president? I'm trying to remember. We had a couple run.
No.
Russ Perot ran a long time ago, but didn't make it.
We've had a lot of independent senators. I mean, even from Vermont and Maine, especially from the Northeast, but not necessarily at the highest levels. Yeah.
So those are how we sort of, and in Vermont we have also what's called a progressive party. If you get, it used to be 5%, I think it's 3% of the vote now, you are recognized as a legitimate party and have status therein. And you have the House of Lords and the House of Commons.
That's right. Yeah. It's
similar. Aligned the same sort of way.
Yeah, but the House of Lords are not elected.
Oh, okay.
So historically they were all hereditary. So it was just because you were born, so you were born into it. Yep. Now that has stopped. There are a few hereditaries left, but most of them now are appointed by the government, and they're called life peers. Okay. So they just do it until they die. And then that's it. Their children don't carry on. But
in the House of Commons, are both sort of liberal and conservative views represented, or does it have? Well,
it's Labour and Conservative are the main two parties. There's a new party now which is rising, which is a very right-wing party called Reform.
Okay.
Which has done very well in the local elections, which were last Thursday. Which obviously we weren't there for that, but Rutland in the UK wasn't having elections because it wasn't part of our electoral cycle. Mm-hmm. So we get elected every 4 years in our local councils. The politicians in Westminster, so that the national ones are elected every 5 years. And as I say, the House of Lords are not elected at all. And I would probably be an advocate for saying that maybe they should be, because it doesn't seem very fair that just because you know someone. Right. Maybe you can get into the House of Lords, which is not exactly democratic, is it?
And then, of course, sitting on top of everything for us is the president and the vice president. And in each state, there's a governor and a lieutenant governor, which are similarly aligned in terms of being.
But we have a constitutional monarchy, so we have a head of state that has no power at all.
Ah, okay. There are differences too, then.
Yeah, because our head of state obviously now is the king.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the queen for many, many years.
Right.
But they have no power essentially to change it. All the laws have to be signed off by them, but they can't make the law.
Can they decide not to sign?
They could, but that would cause a constitutional crisis.
Oh. Use the royal prerogative.
Okay.
It's never been used.
Okay.
Interesting. Hang on, Benedict. Has it ever been used, the royal prerogative?
I think the last time royal assent wasn't given was 1707, I think.
Oh wow!
But they can. The royal prerogative does with an act of war. If you declare war, you don't have to get the king's consent and things like that.
For you.
Sure, you could slide that.
My job. I'm an employment judge.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We call them employment tribunals in the United Kingdom. I think perhaps I don't know if they're called labour courts here. If you're enforcing your employment rights here in America, how do people do that?
Well, there are different levels of the court system here.
Right.
There are side judges, which are on the lower end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Then there's district courts, criminal courts, environmental courts, Supreme Courts.
Okay, but if you had an employment dispute, say you were accusing your employer of discrimination, you'd go to a civil court.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But in the UK, judges are appointed. They used to be appointed by the Lord Chancellor, what they used to call the tap on the shoulder system, which they've now got rid of. And it used to be a bit of an old boys' club, where some say, where the Lord Chancellor would say, well, I've heard you're very good, and a little tap on the shoulder, why don't you apply to join the bench?
Okay.
They've now got rid of that, and we now have something called the Judicial Appointments Commission, or what we call the JAC, made up of appointed commissioners, high-level people, and some senior judges who now put you through a rigorous selection process. They used to call it a competition. They now call it a selection exercise. And so judges in the UK are appointed after selection, almost like a job interview, but it's quite a strange job interview, I can tell you. So I got appointed 2 years ago. But what I'm interested in knowing is that how are judges appointed at state level and at national level? I think, are they elected, or am I wrong about that?
In Vermont, the governor appoints judges.
Ah.
and then they have to be confirmed by what is called the judicial. There's a judicial retention and a judicial nominating. So I've been on both, and it's a Senate function. The House has nothing to do with this. It's just in the Senate.
Okay.
And we receive nominations with big, thick binders of biographies from people, and then we interview them, and then we make our recommendations, and we, quote, send the name up to the governor, and he or she will decide and then appoint, and then the full Senate has to approve them before they run. And then they have 6-year terms. And then every 6 years they come up for judicial retention, where, again, you go through an interview process. You have people ask, are they doing a good job? Are there things that we should know about? And most of the time they do get reappointed. So in a lifetime, a judge might only serve 5 or 6 terms, because that's quite a long with the 6-year term. So do you have terms?
No, so that's the difference. So your selection process is pretty similar. I presume they have an actual interview with you.
Yes,
a selection day. We call it a selection day, but we have to do role play and scenario testing. Yes, they got actors in. On my selection day, they had 2 actors. One was the angry employee, one was the angry employer, and I was role playing as the judge. And they videoed you, and you had a judge and 2 commissioners watching you. To see how you would deal with these warring parties, and then you deliver the decision, which they then checked against, well, has she, delivered the correct decision. So so that's very similar. But in the UK, when you're appointed as a judge, if you're appointed as what's called a salaried judge, so we have part-time judges, which we call them fee-paid, and you can still practice as an attorney, as you would call it. We say solicitor or barrister. But the next level up, the second tier, is what they call a salaried judge, and you have to agree to leave your profession forever. You can never return. So once you're appointed as a salaried judge, which I was 2 years ago, you're appointed for life. So it's a guaranteed job until you're 75, which is the mandatory retirement age. So when they appointed me, I was 58, which meant I could sit as a judge if I want to. I've only been doing it
until
2 years.
75?
Until 75. Unless I do something like go and rob a bank, they can't get rid of me. So one of the differences about our system is that once you've appointed a judge, and sometimes you're appointing somebody who's never sat as a judge before, so they've got no sort of history for you to judge them on, you actually, and there's some various critics of this system, cannot get rid of the judge once they're appointed. And they could be overturned by the appeal courts dozens of times. You wouldn't be able to get rid of them. So it's a strange... So that's different. You've got your 5-year terms. We don't have that.
On the national level, our U.S. Supreme Court is also a lifetime appointment. You don't you don't ever have to do that again.
That's the same system.
But in Vermont, they do come up for retention just like district judges do. So,
interesting.
In fact, last year we had 5 of the Supreme Court in Vermont come up, and they had to go through the process again of sitting and getting interviewed and having me, of all people, ask them questions. And,
I'm sure you gave them a good grilling.
Yeah, well, it's your job to at least find out whether you think they're doing a good job or not. So, it's really fascinating work.
While we're talking about legal issues.
Yes.
10 years ago, I was appointed by the Queen to be the county's what's called High Sheriff, which is the head of law and order.
Okay.
And that is a really historic role. It doesn't have any power anymore. But I can tell you how old historically it is. The first documented High Sheriff of Rutland was in 1129.
Wow.
And that was a man called William de Albini. And his direct descendants still live in Belvoir Castle, which is just outside Rutland in the UK. So 1129, that's an awful long time ago. Yeah. And I was the 601st to be appointed,
We're talking to Andrew Brown, his wife Louise, right, and son Ben, who are visiting from Rutland in the UK, and always kind of had a desire to do this, I guess, and find out how similar we are, how different we might be. It's very, I'm sure that if Mayor Dunches and I went over to the UK, we would find similarities and differences too.
We're sending an open invitation for you to
sure,
come.
you must come.
Yes, we'd love you to come.
Well, that'd be neat.
Yeah, we'd love you
Yeah.
to come.
The city's not paying for it, though.
No,
Brian, you got to pay your own way.
and neither is the state of Vermont. So, hi, Sheriff, you don't drive around then in a car with blue and red lights and sirens and everything?
No, but I was allowed to have a flag on the front of my car.
Oh, a flag?
Yeah.
Okay. And do people recognize that and say, oh, there goes the High Sheriff?
Well, they might do because of the bizarre outfit that I used to wear, which was 18th century court dress, which was basically a very fine velvet tunic, breeches, black tights, buckle shoes, and a sword, and
Really?
and a hat like maybe the uniform was almost something similar to what George Washington would wear.
The tricolor or
It was a bicorn hat, so it had two.
Okay, yeah.
So it was a bit like Lord Nelson would wear, that sort of thing. So I can show you a picture, but I mean, this is radio, so there's no point, really, is there?
But you don't have any power. You can't arrest
There was no
anybody.
power. Well, historically, they had an awful lot of power because you were judge, jury, and executioner, and you had to collect all the tax as well. And historically, no one wanted the job because if you didn't collect enough taxes for the king, you had to make it up out of your own pocket. So of course, no one wanted the job because you became very unpopular straight away because, of course, you were sending people to death, to their deaths and, and collecting their money. And if the king turned up, as they did, because they went around the country visiting different places, they'd expect you to pay for everything. So it might bankrupt you. Just because they turned up with 300 soldiers and all the horses and everyone that went along with it, and you had to give them all the food and everything. Wouldn't pay you.
I don't see a parallel here. In the Wild West, we had marshals who were literally the law and order for whatever area they.
But that's why
you
still have sheriffs here, you see, because that sheriff, they would have come across. The sheriffs would have come over with the first settlers, and that's you still have them as a legal officer, but we don't anymore.
Okay.
So, but we still have the sort of the ceremonial role.
Now, tell me about John Manners. I'm looking at the little bio that I got from somebody about you.
Really?
There's your picture.
Yes.
So that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
I don't know who John Manners is. Who's John Manners?
It says, well, you have Vermont sort of, or Rutland a little bit. It's situated okay. It says on the Canadian border. We're not really that close to the Canadian border. I mean, it's at a good 2 hours, 3 hours
He didn't author
away.
the article, though, so there you go.
What?
It said Andrew didn't author that article, though, so
Okay.
we can't blame him for his geographic inaccuracy.
But it is. I don't know who wrote this. Oh, Sarah Ward, whoever that is.
Yes. Oh, that was he the Duke of Rutland or something? Maybe I think that's what he was.
Yeah, it says located on the Canadian border. Not true that much, but it's close. It is thought the U.S. namesake was named after John Manners, the third Duke of Rutland.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. The Duke of. That again is a historic title, and the Duke of Rutland lives in what's called Beaver Castle, which isn't even in Rutland, but which is very bizarre. But the Duke of Rutland would have been that guy I mentioned earlier, William de Albini, who was the first sheriff. Yeah.
Okay, we need to. Mike's showing me a picture now of the Duke of Rutland, 7th Duke of Rutland, born in 1818 and died in 1906, known as Lord John Manners. Before 1888, was a British statesman. So that's where we got the namesake for our city. I guess is Rutland, England.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, Andrew, before. We have a Rutland, Massachusetts. We think there's one in Ohio. So a lot of the folks that came over at one point, I don't know when they came over, maybe the late 1700s, early 1800s, founded these little Rutland places. And many of the customs and traditions, it seems like that's where they learned it from.
That's right.
So we do have that connection for sure. Very interesting. We're talking to Andrew Brown, his wife Louise, his son Ben, and they're visiting here. We're recording this on Monday the 5th. It will air next Sunday. Well, those of you listening, it's not next Sunday, it's today, the 11th. It's very awkward to do this recording and then try to remember that by the time people hear it, a week will have elapsed, and things, especially in local politics, they can change just like that.
A week's a long time in politics.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what we're doing here today. And I tell you what, why don't we take our second break, our final break of the program, and we'll be back with Andrew and his wife Louise and son Ben in just a minute here, excuse me, on Catamount Community Connection. We're back on Catamount Community Connection, our weekly Sunday public affairs program here on Catamount Radio. And I've been mentioning that the show's brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, Inc., which has brought you the Vermont State Fair here in Rutland for the last 178 years. We got 179 fair coming up in August. And Andrew was telling me they have the 190th, and he's a member of the Rutland in the UK Agricultural Society there. So tell us a little bit about your fair over there.
Yeah, so it's an annual county show. Most counties in the UK have an agricultural show. I would have done historically. Rutland is quite a big one for the county. It's probably one of the biggest events in the county. Probably get 20,000 people turning up, which is almost half the population of the entire county. And there's a lot of farmers will bring their livestock. They'll bring sheep, cattle, they even bring chickens, goats as well. And there'll be displays of different ancient agricultural machinery, steam engines, ploughing, that sort of thing, and a lot of trade stands as well. And they generally, for the last couple of years, have had some stunt motorbike riders, which is pretty scary to watch, to be honest. I mean, it's remarkable how they do it in the big show ring. I mean, it looks, looking at the size of the place where you have your state fair, it's about the same sort of size as the one that we have. We haven't got the big stands like you've got, but it looks a pretty similar area. So there's another affinity we've got.
Yeah. We have, it used to be a 9-day fair. It's dialed back now to 5. And similarly, people will raise pumpkins, for instance, and you get a medal. Yep. If you have the biggest pumpkin.
That's right, yes. Similar sorts of thing happen, yeah.
So all those kind of blue ribbon things go on. We also have entertainment in the U.S., and I'm sure in parts of the U.K., country music is very popular. So we generally have a country act coming once a year at the fair, and people will pay and sit in the grandstand and listen to the country music. We have a demo derby, which is where people will try to smash each other driving cars.
Oh, yeah.
And, we have the rides. So the tilt-a-whirl, the roller coaster, and all that kind of Ferris wheel. So we have outside companies that get hired to come up and put those in.
Sounds very, very similar.
Does. Yeah. So, that is fantastic. There's a lot of similarities, Michael.
A ton of similarities, and we've been talking for months, and I've been interested to see how it all ended up. And while we obviously have our differences, we ran Britain out of the United States pretty early on when we started. We're happy to be friends, right? And it's really cool to have the relationship. Even last night, my wife and I got to go to dinner with the Browns, and just talking about just the way we live our lives. There's so much overlap. There's maybe 10% differences, but in reality, very similar as from a lifestyle standpoint.
But I think it's so good because I like going to foreign countries and traveling and meeting different people, and it's great to go and see the touristy bits. But I think that almost the better bit is getting to talk to the local people like Mike and yourself, and how you live your lives, and them explaining to us and us explaining to them what goes on in our different countries. Because of course we only get quite a blinkered view of what goes on over here in the US, and I'm sure it's the same for you, because we don't all live like they do in Downton Abbey.
Well, yeah, I mean, of late we've had the Prince, and they're not getting along very well, I guess, he and his dad, right, and so that's been a big story here. I don't know if it's as big a story over there, but it seems to be dominating the news here,
right?
And not in a good way. And of course, we have a rather what's the right word to use? I don't want to say anything negative, but we have a president.
Unusual.
It's unusual, and certainly can grab some headlines. And
there you go.
And yet here, if you talk to the average Joe or Jane it might be something to talk about, but it doesn't really affect their lives that much. At least it hasn't yet. We're still going through the early parts of the new administration. We've just went through the first 100 days, and we'll see how things go. The other connection we have, I believe, is, and you're certainly, I think, aware of this, is music. So for years, and I'm 74 years old, so when I was growing up, Elvis Presley and the sort of local bands that came out of Texas, for instance, were dominating the record charts here. And then, of course, in 1963, the Beatles arrived, and then there was this wave of British music that really swamped us. We had the Rolling Stones, and we had this, the Yardbirds, et cetera, and it's still sort of that way. Music is kind of a universal language in many ways, and I can never forget watching. You may or may not be able to remember the Ed Sullivan Show, but he is the one on television here that was the first one to put the four lads from Liverpool, and the girls were screaming, crying, and throwing their clothes on the stage, and it was really something.
Yes.
And it's really similar, I think, in many ways. So, and I know there's been American acts that go over to the UK and are immensely popular too.
That's right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost a two-way flow, isn't it? But it is very strange how that suddenly, as almost a tsunami of British music came over, didn't it, in the 60s?
Yeah. And across all genres too. You know what I mean? We we call it punk over here. I don't know what you do in the UK, but that was a big influence
in the 70s. We had a big punk thing. Yeah.
So
it altered the way most males in America. We didn't have long hair until the Beatles phenomenon.
Right.
And then it seemed like if you wanted to be cool, everybody had to grow their hair past their ears and down the back of their neck. And that was never, ever, ever done before that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the females did to sort of catch up with it, but it was a style that, What
about Madonna? More modern.
Madonna, she was certainly popular on both sides of the ocean for sure. Still is, I guess.
Yeah.
Of course,
Many move that mic over again.
Yeah, many American artists. Like I really love Bruce Springsteen.
Okay,
Yeah, and then, I mean, I don't know much about modern music, but it's Bon Jovi American, isn't it?
Yes, John Bon Jovi. Yeah. And I'm sure Ben listens to different music.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He doesn't listen to the music I like. But
he doesn't sit around listening to the Beatles going, "Wow, this is great."
Sometimes.
Okay.
In fact, at Christmas we had a bit of a karaoke session, and I tried to sing John Denver, "Take Me Home," which I really like. So a bit of a country you wouldn't call that country and western, would you? What would you call that?
He crossed over into just general popularity.
Yeah, he was. He was great. Yeah.
So is it the same there, Louise, with judges where?
Yeah.
And I've known some that before they were judges, they were attorneys first or solicitors in your world.
Yeah.
And they could interact on any sort of level with the general populace. But once they were elevated to the judicial branch, it becomes very, very difficult for them to interact anymore. They have to be very careful about what they say.
That's right.
And because it reflects on their job.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so it is the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it does change your life. For me, I used to be active on Facebook, which a lot of my generation are.
Right.
I'm 60 this year, so that's sort of 50 to 60 generation that like to go on Facebook. And as soon as I became a judge, I became very aware I must never post anything on any of my social media accounts of anything. Don't even like a post if it's vaguely political, because we're not allowed to make any comment about politics, which is quite right, because the judiciary has to be independent of any bias or influence. And so it would be quite wrong for a judge to ever have expressed an opinion about anything political. So we have to be free of any influence, political, economic.
Yeah. No,
so it did change my life, and so I'm no longer active on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. I think I might have posted 1 or 2 photographs of my kids in the last 2 years since I became a judge from a family holiday. And in fact, a lot of judges just close down all their social media accounts just so they don't have to think about it. And I remember when I was appointed as a judge, the the president made a sort of light-hearted reference to it's a little bit like entering the priesthood, and it sort of is. You're a little bit removed from the rest of the world in a way, and that's for a good reason.
No, it's very true here. They have a code of conduct that is expected, and you can't violate that. I've had close friends who, when we run for office here, we have what's called lawn signs. It's about a, 2.5 by 3 foot by 3 foot sign with your name and what you're running for. And people put it on the lawn, and the judge can't do that.
No,
you cannot do that. It's just
absolutely
forbidden.
the same in the UK.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And do you have 3 branches as well? So we have the judicial, the executive, and the legislative branches here.
Yes, we have the separation of powers. In the same
so it's
way.
very similar.
It's the same system.
Yeah.
Absolutely the same system.
But we have the monarchy as well,
Yeah, which is a 4th one, right?
which sits above, but without any power.
That is very fascinating.
Yeah, but we have that same separation of the 3 branches of
Except for the leader of the executive is also a member of the legislature. Important
That
difference.
is true.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, that'd be like if the president was also a senator at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Lord, are you talking about the Lord Chancellor now?
No, I'm on about like the Prime Minister.
Oh, I see, the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that cord will stretch, but Ben, we haven't really got a chance to get to know you too well here.
Okay. I'll stand up
There
for
you
that.
go.
I understand you're going into law enforcement, right?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Now, what made you decide that?
Well, I just always thought of it as a very important job. You know, I think it would be a fulfilling career, something I'd enjoy doing, and it's always important to help people. And you know, recently there's been a bit of a crisis of reputation in the UK regarding the police. You know, I think there's a similar thing going on in America as well.
Yep.
So I think, you know, one of the best ways to fight that is to be a positive change from within, be a good person who goes in and tries to make a difference, yeah.
So, forgive me if I'm using the wrong term, Bobby?
Yeah,
Do they
yeah.
still call you that? Or
Yeah, people
is
say
that
that's a bit
too
of a- I think
old-fashioned?
that's an outdated term.
Copper.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, copper, yeah.
Copper, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was from the buttons, I think, that they used to wear
Maybe it
on
was.
the uniform.
And Bobby was from Robert Peel, who set the first, because his name is Robert.
Okay.
Being Bobby's short for Robert.
Gotcha.
That's why they're called Bobbies.
Okay.
Because he set up the first police force.
The Bow Street Runners.
That's right, yeah.
In London. Yeah.
But you will wear a uniform.
Yes.
Do you have firearm?
Very few of them do. Like when you start as a police officer, you do 2 years probation. After that, you can specialise into a role, and after doing that, you could become a firearms officer. But most of them don't carry guns. No.
So what do they have? Batons or something?
Yeah, a baton, a taser, and a pepper spray as well. And you know, usually that's enough, I guess, because you know gun ownership's very low in the UK, so it's not really necessary in most situations.
And that is very different than here in America.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some people will argue to the death on either side of that question.
Literally.
Especially in Vermont, as a matter of fact, there are people that, you know, believe passionately in both ways. Yeah. So, what would you do in terms of jurisdiction? Would you have? Your dad mentioned high sheriff, but I assume that you're going to be sort of on a local level? Or?
Yeah. So it would be Rutland as a county doesn't have its own police force in the UK because it's so small. So it's Leicestershire, the next door county, much bigger. They handle the law enforcement for us. So I would be placed anywhere within that area, and that's where my area of patrol would be. Yeah.
And you just do that every day? Would you investigate crimes or
investigative? Again, that's you can go straight in as a detective, but that's not something I chose to do. But again, after I've done 2 years probation, I could decide to move into more of an office-based sort of investigative role and look after more complex crimes, that sort of thing.
I guess we call them beat cops here.
Yeah.
That'd be the same.
Patrol officers.
Patrol officers, okay. Would you have your own vehicle?
Drive around, that was actually something that was holding me back a bit. I only got my driver's license recently. And managed to get that in time, only a few months before,
Yeah, I guess if you're going to drive, you'll probably want to have a license.
Have a car, you have your own car and you're driving around, just answering any calls and just patrolling, making sure people are safe.
Driving course, don't you?
Yeah, cheaper car insurance as well, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, you're right. We've had, unfortunately, a certain group of folks that don't respect law enforcement here. I don't mean here like in Rutland. I think Rutland, the city and certainly the county, is very supportive of our law enforcement officers. But there have been other communities in Vermont and certainly in other states where that has not been true. And we went through the whole defund the police movement where they wanted to reduce the size of the forces and that kind of thing. So I didn't realize that was also true in the UK.
Yeah. A lot of those sorts of political issues. There's quite a lot of crossover because everyone's using the same internet nowadays. Those sorts of issues. It was very big in the UK. The Black Lives Matter protests, they were very big as well. There were some statues that of prominent people involved in the slave trade in I think, was it in Bristol?
Bristol,
yeah, in Bristol, we pulled down a statue and pushed it into the river, and it's still there, isn't it? Or did they?
No, they took it out the river and they've put it in a museum now behind a cage, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Well, this has been like the easiest interview I've done in a long, long time. With all due respect to the mayor, who's in here usually every month or 6 weeks, and so I want to thank you for. We've got about 2 minutes left. Andrew Brown, his wife Louise, and his son Ben have joined us from London in the UK. And we've discussed a lot of the similarities.
We're actually from Rutland in the UK, not London.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say London? Yeah. I got the Beatles mixed up again. But they were from Liverpool.
Liverpool, yes, that's right.
Okay. And where were the Stones from?
Oh, they were from London, yeah, because their first performance was on Eel Pie Island, I think, in the Thames.
Okay, yeah.
So I think they were mainly from London. Yeah. They all went to the same school, I think.
So Andrew and his wife and son came over to just visit for a couple of days, get to know people here in Rutland, and I hope you've had a good time. I hope that the Board of Aldermen meeting tonight, and again, by the time you folks hear this, it'll be already have happened 4 or 5 days in the past, but Mike's going to keep us apprised of how things go there. Any last kind of things you want to mention to our listeners, either Andrew or Louise? Or
we'd love to see any Rutlanders from Vermont over in Rutland in the UK. That would be great and we'd be able to show them round and have some chats like this. Maybe have a chat on the local radio station.
Yeah.
And we'd love to entertain them. And we must say a big thank you to the mayor because he's been entertaining us like royalty, to be honest. We feel a bit like royalty coming here. Better be careful because it didn't go too well last time the English royalty were in charge here.
You'll be in the House of Lords before you know it.
And then, Brian, if people want to see Andrew talk a little bit about the Rutland UK, they can watch the Board of Aldermen meeting on PEG TV.
Okay, great idea.
They'll be able to go and watch that on YouTube.
Yep. Well, thank you again for joining us today. Safe travels. I assume you go from maybe New York to London or back, or
we're going to have a look at Niagara Falls, and then we're going back to Miami, and then flying out of Miami, I think,
to London.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you both, all three of you actually, for visiting, and it's really been a lot of fun today. Mm-hmm. And we will see all of you next week here on Catamount Community Connection.